Hello, this video is about why your ESL teacher does not want you to just copy-paste answers into quizzes and tests. So you might have had a quiz like this where you're asked to give an author's ideas about some topic. But the question doesn't say to quote the author and it doesn't say to copy and paste your answers. If you do copy and paste, like this person did, you might get a 0 on the question. In the worst case, you might get reported for plagiarism, and that's because the question didn't ask for a quote. And also, this person did not use quotation marks. Speaking of which, some words I'm going to use in this video are quote, paraphrase, and quotation marks. A quote is exactly the author's words in exactly that order. A paraphrase is the author's idea, but in your words, and quotation marks mean these things. Okay. So let's walk through the steps of paraphrasing, and I hope you'll see why paraphrasing is a much deeper skill than quoting. So looking back at the last question, according to Irvin, how do college students misunderstand the writing process? This person answered with a quote. Specifically, it's this quote right here. Some writers believe they must perform certain steps in a particular order to write correctly. Rather than being a lockstep linear process, writing is recursive. That means we cycle through and repeat the various activities of the writing process many times as we write. So those are exactly Irvin's words. And if I want to paraphrase this, as an ESL student, the first thing I have to do is understand even the grammar and the vocabulary of the author's words, of the author's quote. That means I have to understand vocabulary, grammar, a lot of different things that are difficult about this quote that a native speaker might not think are difficult at all, but because you're an ESL student, they're a special challenge. And part of understanding a quote is understanding the words and the grammar in it. And then also you have to understand the ideas. If you understand the words and the grammar, you don't always understand the ideas perfectly, but in order to paraphrase, you do have to understand the ideas. So you have to have some idea in your head, some mental model of what the author was trying to say, right? So in our case, the author was saying, here's one way of writing that people think is correct, which is making a list and just following the list. But Irvin says that that's not right. On the other hand, this other idea of writing in a sort of circular pattern where you repeat many tasks many times, that's the right idea. So if you understand this, then you really understood what Irvin was saying. But to paraphrase, you also have to put that in your own words. Take those ideas and express them yourself. For example, it's wrong to think that writing is just checking items off a list. Instead, it is a cycle of activities that repeats. So this is Irvin's idea, but it's not Irvin's words. I had to think of this myself and put it into my own words, and then my paraphrase is done. Okay. So to go over the steps one more time, and I didn't say this the first time, but of course you have to find the part of the article that you want to quote, right? The part of the article that has the information that you want. That's an important skill too. You had to read it, you had to understand it, and that means understanding the words and the grammar, etc. You had to understand the ideas, right, which is not just the grammar and the words, and then express the idea in your own words. So paraphrasing is actually not simple at all. You have to understand it well, you have to have language skills to read and to put it into your own words, right? On the other hand, if you're just copying and pasting, you don't have to do most of this, right? Copying and pasting is much simpler. Of course, you have to find the right part of the article in order to copy and paste it, but you don't really have to read it. You just have to know what words are in it. For example, if you are looking for a part of the article that's about checklists, you can just Control F and type checklist, and you'll find the part of the article where Irvin is talking about that. You don't have to actually read that section to understand that. You also don't have to understand deeply his ideas about checklists versus recursive writing processes. And you definitely didn't have to put the ideas into your own words. So copying and pasting is a much easier task than paraphrasing. You only had to do one thing, right? So let's look at some examples of quoting and paraphrasing in answer to the same question, and let's look at it from a teacher's perspective and see what that answer tells us about what the student actually did, what they understood, what they didn't understand, what skills they have, what skills they don't have, etc. And I think you'll get the idea that paraphrasing actually shows us a lot more about what the student understands than quoting does. So here's an answer to the same question. This person says, Irvin says that many students follow a checklist when they write, but they shouldn't. They should repeat many times. Okay, so there are some grammar problems with this, but did they find the right part of the article? I think they did, because this is pretty much what Irvin says in that section. They definitely understood it, right? They understood it well enough to understand the ideas. And it seems like they understood the ideas well, but when it came to expressing that in their own words, their own language ability was not perfect. But this tells us this student can read, right? The student can read, and actually, Irvin's article is not easy to read, so their reading skills actually pretty high. They can understand even some pretty complicated, complex ideas. When it comes to expressing in their own words, that's really where their weakness is. But this gives us a lot of information about this student. Okay, so here's another example. Irvin says that he uses a checklist to grade student papers. So I'm not sure if this student, it says, yeah, I think they found the right part of the article. I'm not even sure that they did that. They definitely didn't really understand. I'm not sure if they understood the grammar, the vocabulary. They definitely didn't understand the ideas, because this is not what Irvin was trying to say. On the other hand, their own grammar is fine. If you look at just the grammar of this sentence and the vocabulary, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that this student didn't understand what Irvin was trying to say. But again, this student tried to paraphrase Irvin's idea, and they didn't do it successfully, but it was different from the last student. And that tells us this student has a different set of strengths and weaknesses than the last student. So as a teacher, this tells me a lot about this student too. So here's another one. That means we cycle through and repeat the various activities of the writing process many times as we write. So this is from the quote, but it's only the last part of the quote. That means, what is that? I'm not sure if this student understood the quote, understood what Irvin was trying to say, because they selected just the last part of the quote, and they selected a part that refers to another part, but because we don't have that part, we don't know what this part really means. So I think they found the right quote, but they should have taken more of it, and that tells me, I'm not sure if they understood what they were reading. So I don't know if they read it and understood it. I can't tell at all if they understood the ideas. I have no idea. It seems like they didn't, because if they understood it, they would have quoted the most important part, not just the end part. And of course, they did not express this in their own ideas, because this is exactly Irvin's words. So this is not only a copy-paste, but it's a pretty bad example of a copy-paste, because it's a copy-paste that shows that they didn't really understand what they were copying and pasting at all. In any case, I think we've seen that paraphrasing can tell us a lot more about what students understand than quoting does. Okay, so that's why your teacher usually wants you to paraphrase and put things in your own words when you're on a quiz or on a test, or sometimes even in an essay, to show that you understand what you're reading and you have the skill to understand it, understand the language, understand the ideas, and then put the ideas back into your own language. Okay. So, in conclusion, if the teacher asks for quotes, then of course you can give them quotes. Make sure you use quotation marks. Quotation marks mean this is someone else's words, they're not my words. If the teacher doesn't ask for quotes, don't assume that a quote is okay. And if you use a quote, definitely put it in quotation marks, because if you have a direct quote with no quotation marks, that can look like plagiarism. Plagiarism means you're trying to steal someone else's ideas and words without giving them credit. If you don't have the quotation marks, it's like you're trying to say, this is my idea and these are my words, but they're not. And that's plagiarism. Okay? So be careful out there, paraphrase, and show that you really understand what you're reading. So this is the article that I was referring to earlier. If you want to go read it on your own, it is a very good article. Thanks for listening.